And welcome to this week's Retvlog, where, of course, the pre-patch is fast approaching. It's going to be upon us in less than a fortnight. And so people are going to be having to get ready, if you've not been practicing on the PTR or on the beta, to using the new talents, but also to slight changes in the rotation. Not massive amounts, but little things like judgment, of course, are changing. So you might want to be simming a few things, seeing how it's going to work for your character. Remember, it's not going to be as simple as, oh, which talents do I use? It might not be that straightforward. There might be some that's better for one person, some that's better for another. So let's have a look at simming a few things. I've simmed my character a little bit, and then we're also going to have a little look at legendaries too. So, first thing you might want to do is to download Simulation Craft if you haven't already got that. I mean, of course, you may not be interested just yet. But if you do, and you Google download Simulation Craft, you'll be presented with this. You don't just want to download the main one there, because that's still going to be Legion. Where you always get the latest versions is in here, and this is the case at any point. But more so, especially when a new expansion is about to come out, but hasn't come out yet. Simulation Craft nightly builds are found here. So you can click on that link. It'll look absolutely horrendous if I click on that link, so I'm not going to here. And you just look for the one that's near the top with the .exe at the .exe at the end. It should be for patch 8.0. That's what you're looking for, 8.01.01 or something like that. And then you'll be able to put the talents in. What you'll want to do to put the talents in is look at the... When it says talents, you just get a string of numbers. So the first number on the left is for the first row, your level 15 row, and it'll say 1, 2 or 3. 1 means the talent on the left, 2 is the talent in the middle, 3 is the talent on the right. You can look at a BfA talent calculator if you're not sure which is which and just go from there. So let's just have a little look at what I've been simming for my own character. Now, I will just sort of say at this point, caution with sims at the moment. Everything's fast moving. So first of all, Blizzard themselves are tuning. You know, they've started tuning now, but it's not necessarily very advanced. So a lot of changes can potentially be made. Obviously, when changes are made, then the people doing the SimCraft modules need to change things as well. Sometimes things, especially if something's quite new, you've got to try and work out how it works so that you can then model it accurately as well. So don't just sim all your stuff now and then in 2 weeks' time go, oh, I simmed it a couple of weeks ago and this is what I'm going to do. It may change then. But it might be an idea now just to play about with it and get yourself familiar with it. So, yeah. And there are some things that are going to be changed about Ret Paladins that haven't yet. Although I do notice there's a build that's just come out, but I haven't checked on any details of that. So I'll try and go through a couple of the pertinent ones as I go through some of these sims. So the first thing is, if you just simmed a basic set, the profile that's automatically in SimCraft, you might get something like this. First thing you'll notice, it's going all the way from around about 2 million DPS to about 4,000 DPS. Because, of course, remember, we've got a squish, we've got a stat squish, and an item level squish as well. So the DPS is going to, you know, if you haven't broken the 2 million DPS yet, you haven't got long to do it, because then you ain't never doing it. But let's start simming our own character. So my own character is going to do a little bit more. Now, let's say there are a few things that are going to be changing. Of course, like I've just said, judgment. Not only is judgment going to generate a holy power, and therefore not the sort of thing you want to do in 5 holy power, which is very different to now. In fact, I keep catching myself, like especially recently, now that I've played a fair amount in the beta, but I'm still playing live, but only like once a week really for raiding. It's really awkward. Like sometimes I'll be on 5 holy power and I need to use judgment, and I'll pause. I've noticed myself doing that a few times on Wednesday, actually. And I paused and then did it, because there's something acting against me at using it at 5 holy power. But you won't want so, because, you know, it's a holy power generator, and the debuff it places on isn't going to last a long time. It's a consumable debuff, you know. So there will be enough baseline things changing a little bit, not massively, but a little bit, that you might want to keep as much as possible the same while you ease yourself into it. So for that, what you'd want to use, in terms of the DPS talents, I'm not going to talk about utility talents, you'd want to use Zeal. You can still use Blade of Wrath, which will do much as it does now. Blade of Wrath, of course, remember, exists, or will exist, in baseline form as well, in the form of Art of War. Wake of Ashes won't be automatically there. So if you want it, you're going to have to take it as a talent, and it'll be, you know, well, the cooldown could change a little bit, but at the moment it's not a 30-second cooldown. But you could take Wake of Ashes, and you could take Crusade as well, even though that's not necessarily at the moment the best one to take. But it may be absolutely fine when the pre-patch comes out. So yeah, if you want to keep it all same, you Zeal, Blade of Wrath, Wake of Ashes, and Crusade. So when I sim myself for this, you know, I got like, okay, so this is pure patchwork. Remember, whenever you see sims that other people have done, it's always basically the standard settings, which is patchwork fight. Now, of course, many fights are not patchwork fight, and of course, it's no use at all for dungeons. There are different settings you can use, and you could try and monkey about with those a little bit as well. Like for, you know, if you're going to go from trash pack to trash pack in dungeons, I tend to do hectic ad cleave for things like that. So, you know, just trying to, and you can vary the fight length and things like that. But these are just bog standard patchwork sims. So then what I thought is, okay, so, you know, Zeal, Blade of Wrath, Wake of Ashes, fine, I'll add those. But at the moment, Inquisition is the stronger talent to take. And just to sort of show you how much stronger. So I swapped the Crusade for Inquisition and 5592 DPS, so more DPS. Now, I just want to point out a couple of things. One, Inquisition is going to be nerfed a bit. It's been for some time, you know, a bit too powerful on the beta. So it is going to be nerfed. So it will be brought in line. Now, whether that nerf comes in time for the pre-patch, I would think it will. But whether it does or not, I can't say. But at the moment, you know, if you're going to sim yourself, you are always going to find Inquisition being the one to take. Because it's a bit too powerful. So then what I did is, okay, let's add some other things in. Now, you know, I've been trying to sort of rail against this for quite some time now. There's been an awful lot of people. One of the most boneheaded things that anyone has been saying about Rets all the way through Alpha and Beta is all Consecration, how rubbish. Well, let's look at Consecration here. And what we can see is when I swap to Consecration, and remember, these are patchwork sims. So this is pure single target, not moving anywhere. And Consecration beats the rest of the row there. It's a very powerful talent, even for single target. And it always was. It always has been all the way through. So, but there was an issue at some point where it was, and the sims benefiting from haste. I think that's been fixed now, so I think it should be accurate there. But again, just change it, you know, when you've got, you know, keep practicing the sims when little things change. And always keep making sure you're downloading the latest version of Simcraft, because you can expect, I mean, it says nightly builds there. There may or may not be nightly, but you do want to keep checking it every now and then. Every time you come around to doing a round of sims, always just check that you've downloaded the latest version there as well. Now, some people may say about that, oh, well, that's because patchwork, you're not moving anywhere. You know, if you start moving, all of a sudden Consecration is not as good. Bear in mind, Consecration as it is now in Legion, yeah, that's a big problem with it, because the duration is equal to the cooldown, which means, you know, you plonk your Consecration somewhere. If you, or the mobs more specifically, move out of that before you can hit it again, then you're losing damage. With this one, the duration is much less than the cooldown. So the duration, it does it over like a few seconds. So all you need is the stuff to stay there for a few seconds, like 6 seconds, and you're getting your maximum damage out of it. It doesn't matter if it then moves on and somewhere else. So it's actually much better as a result of that. But then let's say, okay, let's say we don't just want to use the same abilities we've been able to use in Legion. We want Hammer of Wrath back. Hammer of Wrath's coming back. Can we use Hammer of Wrath? Yes, we can use Hammer of Wrath. Looking decent. So at the moment, it's simming about 5755. So very, very competitive with everything else. In fact, as I go through these sims so far, that's the highest simming combination I've done at this point. So we can definitely improve things with a Hammer of Wrath there, even over Blade of Wrath. But again, I'll just caution that little things can change there. So in a pure single target fight, you could definitely get some benefit of that. Remember also, whenever you're simming, always try and think about conditions. And some conditions, because they're going to deviate from patchwork, even on a boss encounter. Try and think some conditions favour others. So Hammer of Wrath, for example, is not that bothered if you're having to move around a bit too much. Okay, it's not ideal. Remember that Hammer of Wrath is only available during Avenging Wrath stroke Crusade. You don't want to be moving around all the time when you've got that active, unless you're moving with the thing you're hitting, in which case it's okay. And the same during Executes. But, you know, let's say on Agrimar, for example, you know, especially on the Execute phase, and you're having to move out for the blaze things and then move back in. The Hammer of Wrath, there, that's another ability you've got available to use at that point. And, of course, is a Holy Power Generator. So, let's look at Crusade now. Let's stick Crusade in. So, we can see we are losing a significant amount of damage going from Inquisition to Crusade. Because they have 5, 4, 7, 9 DPS there. Again, that is because Inquisition is a bit too powerful. Now, I'm not sure about Crusade. I did have an inkling that they might even buff Crusade a little bit. I think in terms of its duration, not so much in terms of, you know, how much haste and damage it gives you and crit and all that sort of stuff, which is removed. That's the other thing I should probably mention at this point, actually, just to draw your attention to it again. Certain abilities will obviously, like Judgment, you're going to look at Judgment again. Okay, that's changed. That's clearly changed. Some of them are a bit more subtle. So I will just point out, remember, Avenging Wrath looks quite similar. You'll look at it and it goes, oh, it makes me pop wings. And it lasts 2 minutes and it makes me do extra damage. And that's what Avenging Wrath does. Do bear in mind that it also gives you extra crit as well. So try and take that into account. But that sort of disappears with the Crusade. You know, it's like the haste and the damage. So, because you can think about, in Legion, you can almost think about Crusade being like Avenging Wrath, only you start up on lower damage, but it ramps up, but you also get the haste ramping up as well. But you don't really lose anything as such, apart from the fact you start on a lower base damage and you have to ramp it up. Whereas that's not the case with BfA. So then, of course, an awful lot of people like Divine Purpose as well. And, you know, and recently, you know, people haven't had a hankering after it because, of course, you know, we pretty much use Soul of the High Lord if we can, which gives us that Divine Purpose talent. Unfortunately, at the moment, if you look at it, it's very weak at the moment with its simming. But, again, I know that's one that they're going to be buffing. So that is going to be buffed. I don't know when. But that is going to be receiving a buff. So Inquisition is going to receive a nerf. Crusade, I forget. And Divine Purpose is receiving a buff. So, and I'm not going to say as well, because I know people hanker after, oh, which are the best talents, or these are the talents I like, can I just play these for everything? And it's sort of one of those things, it depends how much you want to min-max is the answer to that. You know, if you're not really min-maxing at all, if you're not doing very hard content, of course you can take what talents you like. Of course you can. But if you do want to min-max it a bit, often you will find different circumstances. So even if they get them reasonably balanced, and so you've got Divine Purpose and Crusade and Inquisition on a patchwork sim, all look very, very close to each other. Doesn't mean to say, oh, just pick which one you like and that's fine, because, you know, think about the varying of the fights. And also your own gear might change it. You know, one person might sim it and it looks all equal. You might sim it for your own character and it's actually not so equal. So that's just in terms of talents, and again, just, you know, play around with them, see what you get out of it. Try a few AoE type situations as well. Like Beast Lord can sometimes be good for dungeons at times, because mixture of like single target and then trash pack stuff like that. Sometimes used, or even some raid fights, but quite a small number of them these days. But then you think to yourself, okay, so I'll sort of be okay with talents. That'll be fine. I can sim myself. Change my talent, and that's the thing to get used to. Like at the moment, we don't really change our talents. Like the talents are the talents, unless you're just trying to pass on certain fights, in which case some variation in talents. If you're given specific roles on that fight, fine. But we are probably going to be changing a few talents around for different fights a little bit. Now, then we think to ourselves, well, what about legendaries? Because at the moment, of course, you know, I'm using Whisper of the Nathrazim, Soul of the High Lord for everything. Is that the case here? No. You know, I was able to get myself a nice boost of DPS by switching to, for example, Chain of Thrain and Sephir's Secret. Or Sephir's Secret, very nice. Because when you also look, you know, when I've looked at all these sims and you've looked at the stat weights that are coming from them, just caution a couple of things. One thing you sort of notice, you can sort of see it here, definitely, but this has been the case for all of them, is Mastery is simming significantly lower than everything else. So you might be forgiven for thinking, oh my god, are we going back to Mastery lagging behind? Yes and no. At the moment, Mastery is lagging behind, and it is going to receive a buff. I believe it's going to be a 20% buff, which I don't think we've had yet. But even that, if I add 20% onto that, it's not necessarily, it's going to bring it very much closer in line, but not necessarily right in line. But then, of course, I also realise, because Mastery has been, you know, the stat, or one of the stats to go for, you know, if you're going to pick 2 stats in Antorus, it's sort of been Haste Mastery for most stuff. Very dangerous to think in terms of just loading up on 2 stats there. Remember what I've said before, that with Rets especially, the stats are always fairly close. So if you get lots of one stat, then it starts, you get less benefit from getting even more of it. The others are falling behind, so you get more benefit of getting some of that. The same is very much the case here. The Mastery is simming very low for me because, like any Antorus geared Ret, I've got quite a lot of Mastery. In fact, I've got much less than many people, but it's still way more than other stats. So the fact that I've got a lot of Mastery explains that. If the gear changes, it'll be brought much more in line with that. But you could sort of look at this and think, well, again, if there were 2 stats you'd sort of be wanting, then maybe crit haste out of the 2. But versatility is very much in the mix as well, depending on exactly where you are with that. But yeah, you'd be thinking of, it'll change from person to person. But if you had, you know, if you were just one of those people that just goes, just tell me which 2 stats, then we'd say crit haste. But also, I just want to point something else out. Like at the moment in Legion, strength is not simming that great. The primary stat's not simming that great. So the secondary stats on gear is a much bigger effect. Of course, it's going to be a large effect on the necks and the rings, but even on other gear that has the strength. Strength is simming better. So it is tending to be a little bit out ahead. So that helps item level become much more of a thing. Also, just to remind you, while we're talking about item level, I've said this before, but I'll just say it again. If ever you get any relics that at the moment are an item level upgrade, but they're not an actual upgrade because they've got rubbish traits on the Netherlight Crucible, don't throw them away. Remember, the Netherlight Crucible is disappearing with the pre-patch, at which point item level is king with relics. Okay, but also with gear, so you might sim a piece of gear that's got a decent item level, but you know, just because of the stats on it, it's not actually an upgrade, so you're thinking of getting rid of it. It might be an idea just to keep hold of it for the pre-patch, because all of a sudden you might want to be changing a few bits of gear around as well. And again, the way to do that would sim it. Obviously, Simcraft is not necessarily all the tidiest way to do that. We've been spoilt in Legion because we've had Raid Bots 2.0. That's helped us do that. I'm assuming, I've not kept tabs on that, but I'm going to assume that that will be updated to cope with stuff, first of all, at the pre-patch and then with the BfA launch as well. But so you could probably use that once it goes live. I haven't actually checked. Maybe there is a BfA version already up there. But given that everything's still in flux, I would think they'd probably want to release that with the pre-expansion itself. But hopefully that tool will be there for you to be able to do it in a much simpler way as well. So, but yeah, if you want to have a go now, then there is a simulation craft module for BfA with a nice, easy, well, relatively easy to use interface. You don't have to build it yourself like people who've been simming up to this point have been having to do. So get your character on there. Don't forget, when you want to import the details of your own character, don't import from Armory, import from the Simulation Craft add-on, although that'll probably be less of an issue with the BfA bit, because one of the main problems with the Armory is it doesn't contain the information on relic traits. Well, the relic traits are going, so that might be less of a problem. But still, the Simulation Craft add-on is way better, and it's quite simple. You just do /simc, you get a data, copy it, paste it into your import area of Simulation Craft. Easy. So if you've got any questions about anything, don't forget to put them down below. We'll be getting quite close to the point where we'll be doing a live Q&A at some point. Next weekend, I'm going to be working on getting the Essentials Guide ready. I think I'm... Jesus Christ. I think I'm just about convincing myself to bring out the Essentials Guide for the pre-patch and hope that it sort of stays the same over the expansion. So that's what I'm aiming to do. So I'll be working on that. So there won't be a Retvlog next week, unless, of course, there is something just to quickly talk about, or someone comes up with a cunning idea for something for me to do in the meantime, because I want to spend next weekend basically doing that and nothing else. So that'll all be ready for you before the pre-expansion patch comes out, only just before, but before still. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share with other people who may also be interested in simming their Rets. And until next time, I'll see you later.